I mean, the things that he's doing is not trying to make America better. He's ruining our infrastructure, every department in our government. He's ruining, and he's right now destroying our economy. He's taken away all of our allies. We're a pariah in the world.
In recent months, the name Elon Musk has become synonymous not only with innovation, but also with disaster. It's hard to believe that Tesla was recently considered an untouchable giant in the world of electric vehicles, and today its future hangs in the balance. How did a company that changed the automotive industry lose more than $400 billion in a matter of weeks? What happened to Tesla's image when its products became associated not with progress but with political toxicity? Why are even loyal European buyers who were once proud of their Tesla purchases now turning away from the brand and demanding their money back?
Well, this feels more like a Tesla-only story when you look at just this fall in EV sales for them that they're suffering across Europe, down 45% in January. The wider EV market in Europe up 37%, so rivals are catching up and performing.
This is not just a historical decline. It is a chain of events in which not only competitors, but also government intervention, secret economic wars, and Musk's own uncontrollable behavior have played a crucial role. So how did one of the world's most ambitious entrepreneurs turn Tesla from an object of adoration into an object of international hatred? And how could this affect the future of not only the company, the entire electric vehicle industry?
Running around on stage with the Tesla stock price, where the stock price had gone in half. And he was overjoyed. What an evil thing to do. What a creep, what a jerk. Like who derives joy?
In this video, we take a detailed look at what led to Tesla's incredible collapse in the European market, how Donald Trump's trade tariffs became a catalyst for global economic instability for the company, and how Europe, returning to its own interests, decided to take revenge on the American giant. Why did Tesla become the main target? And how did the protracted crisis caused by rising component prices and supply disruptions become the final nail in the coffin for a brand that was recently considered a symbol of the future?
Teslas are being torched across the country. Dealerships shot up and set on fire. Spray paint to vandalize and make a statement. People in Southern California are getting notes on their Teslas, calling them complicit Nazis for owning electric cars.
In addition, we will not forget how these events affected Musk personally. His tweets, full of contempt and rage, went viral and actually affected Tesla's market value, prolonging its decline. Instead of smoothing over the crisis, Musk continued to fan the flames. And most interestingly, the protests, which began as sporadic actions by dissatisfied customers in Europe, quickly grew into a global movement that even spread to workers at American factories. In this video, we take a detailed look at how one mistake by Musk, triggered by his political statements and actions, turned into a major economic disaster for the company, as well as the consequences for all of us. Will Tesla and its ambitious founder be able to regain their lost ground, or is their downfall the beginning of the end for all American electric car manufacturers? Stay with us to find out the whole truth about how Tesla's incredible fall could become the biggest business failure of the decade.
371, most were saying 350 to 360. Now they're coming in at 336,068, production of 362,615. So for some point of reference here, you're going back to Q2, maybe Q1 of 2022 in terms of the last time that they had production this or deliveries this low for one quarter. So again, Tesla deliveries worse than expected at just over 336,000 deliveries in the first quarter. Guys, I'll send it back to you.
That's horrible. Can I just ask Phil, how about the Cybertruck? How's that doing? You got a little inventory there in the Cybertruck?
In recent weeks, the situation surrounding Tesla and its founder Elon Musk has taken an unexpected turn. What was recently perceived as a phenomenon of progress and a successful business empire now raises more questions than answers. Tesla's decline in the market, especially in Europe, has been a real disaster for the company. At the end of March 2025, Tesla's shares fell by 40%, wiping more than $400 billion off its market capitalization. This was not just a temporary dip, it was a crushing blow with consequences that are yet to be fully understood. But what happened to Tesla, which was once at the peak of its success? Why is a company that seemed like the undisputed leader in the electric vehicle market in 2024 now literally falling apart before our eyes? The answers to these questions can be found in a combination of political mistakes, global economic crises, and failures in the company's management
over the last couple of months. But the other thing that this could potentially be is an attempt at readjustment or correction by the Trump administration, in that one of Trump's closest kind of allies and supporters, and someone who's clearly very influential in the administration, is coming out to kind of push back against the recently implemented policies. So I'm thinking, or maybe hopeful is the right word, that this might be a signal that the administration is considering walking back some of those policies.
Let's start with the fact that the crisis at Tesla was not just another correction in the stock market. It was a severe economic blow dealt by European countries, primarily Germany, France, and Italy. In 2025, these countries, which until recently were the very markets where Tesla was growing, became a real nightmare for it. While at the beginning of the year Tesla's sales in Europe were growing every quarter, by March the situation had changed dramatically. Losses in key countries exceeded 70%. Germany recorded a 73% drop, France 66%, and Italy 70%. These figures do not simply reflect a decline in demand for cars, they represent the rejection by entire countries of a product that they had recently considered a symbol of progress and the future. Protests against Tesla, which began as local actions by dissatisfied consumers, quickly escalated into mass demonstrations. Protesters not only blocked access to dealerships, but also engaged in actual street fights with security guards, smashing shop windows and shouting anti-Musk slogans.
That's from the European Automobile Manufacturers Association. People just choosing with their wallets to not buy Teslas because of that Musk-Trump association. And actually here in London, an activist group called Everyone Hates Elon actually have been hacking bus stop signs with posters. I actually passed one yesterday. At first I wasn't quite sure what was happening, but it said the words 0 to 1939 in 3 seconds. Illusion here, 0 to 60 in like 3 seconds or something. But this poster was alluding to the start of World War II, and the image was of Musk giving that hand salute that we saw at Trump's inauguration that many have attacked as a Nazi gesture. Musk, though, has neither admitted or denied what he was doing. But we're seeing the knock-on effect of that anti-Musk anger across Europe and in terms of sales.
The reasons for such widespread discontent run much deeper than simply a mismatch between price and quality. Returning to what was recently considered Tesla's strength, it is impossible not to notice how Elon Musk's personality has become increasingly toxic for his company. His public statements, in which he called European politicians bureaucratic parasites and anti-innovation relics, have been a major factor in the loss of trust. Musk, who was once an ambassador for a sustainable future and green energy, has begun to lose that image. Instead of seeing him as a genius, Europeans began to perceive him as a threat to political stability and technological progress. Finding themselves at the center of a geopolitical storm, Musk and Tesla were unable to stay out of the fray. These statements not only exacerbated relations with key markets, but also caused a sharp drop in sales. What ultimately caused such a sharp decline? It was not just a trade conflict. The situation was exacerbated by the introduction of trade tariffs, which became a real-time bomb for Tesla. In January 2025, US President Donald Trump signed an executive order imposing heavy tariffs on components for electric vehicles. At first glance, this seemed like a step toward protecting American manufacturing, but the reality was much more devastating. Tariffs imposed on such important elements as lithium, cobalt, nickel, semiconductors, and batteries were a fatal blow to Tesla's global model, which had been built on international integration for many years.
After Trump imposed those sweeping 25% tariffs on aluminum and steel imports, the European Union retaliating with tariffs on up to $28 billion of U.S. goods. Trump making it clear this isn't over, vowing to respond in kind with sweeping retaliatory tariffs early next month.
They're doing what they should be doing, perhaps, for the European Union, but it does create ill will. And as you know, we're going to be doing reciprocal tariffs. So whatever they charge us, we're we're charging them.
Canada also striking back with new tariffs on $20 billion worth of U.S. goods, mostly steel and aluminum, but also computers and sporting goods.
These components, imported from Europe, China, and South Korea, became significantly more expensive. Tariffs on these key materials ranged from 25 to 35%, significantly increasing production costs. Even for giants like Tesla, whose scale of production could have offset these additional costs, this became a real problem. Unlike Ford and General Motors, which relied more on domestic production, Tesla bet on global supply chains, which, as it turned out, backfired badly. It soon became clear that the company was caught in a trap where the two paths it could choose, either absorb the losses or raise prices, both led to a further decline in demand.
Canada, the largest supplier of steel to the U.S., slapping new tariffs on $20 billion worth of U.S. goods that are sold in Canada. And the 27 countries of the European Union imposing retaliatory tariffs on up to $28 billion worth of U.S. goods sold in Europe, including Harley-Davidson motorcycles and Kentucky bourbon. President Trump with the Irish Prime Minister visiting the White House today. The president suggesting his tariffs won't stop here, saying, "Of course, I'm going to respond." And tonight, right here, the new poll showing 56% of Americans disapprove of President Trump's handling of the economy. The number's even worse now on the president's tariffs.
But tariffs were not the only factor at play. In response to U.S. trade aggression, the European Union also introduced new tariffs on cars manufactured in the U.S., including Tesla. These measures became a real economic weapon aimed directly at the heart of the company. Europe did not stop at tariffs, but also significantly reduced subsidies for Tesla electric vehicles, while local brands such as Volkswagen and Renault continued to receive full state subsidies. This blow to Tesla's price competitiveness in key markets, combined with rising component prices due to U.S. tariffs, became the catalyst for the downturn. The company found itself in a stalemate, and this was only the beginning. Many European consumers, disappointed not only by Musk's policies, but also by the sharp price increases, began to abandon Tesla en masse. Such changes do not happen overnight, but demand for Tesla's products fell so quickly and sharply that it could not be ignored. For a company that had built its strategy for many years on the premise that its electric cars were not just an environmentally friendly choice, but a revolution in automotive manufacturing, this crisis was a real blow on all fronts. In early 2025, more than 60% of former Tesla owners in Europe said their decision to switch cars was due to a loss of trust in the brand and its political toxicity. This figure was like a bolt of lightning that struck Tesla's reputation and its CEO. Musk and Tesla found themselves at the center of a global storm, and no one could predict how it would end. Thus began Tesla's incredible transformation from a symbol of the technological revolution to a company that was no longer perceived as a leader in innovation. For many, Elon Musk was no longer a genius, but the main culprit behind the company's downfall, his name no longer associated with progress, but with global economic turmoil. Tension grew within the company, while Musk continued in his usual style, ignoring expert advice and the press. He did not slow down, he was at the center of every crisis, and his every move was another blow to a company that was already on the brink of collapse.
Outperforming as well in some cases, doing better than Tesla. And you just have to think, how much more is this a sustained issue for Tesla going forward, given the fact that you have Elon Musk, who's been very forthright in his opinions, particularly weighing in on politics, particularly in Europe. We've just had the European elections, which Musk has been very focused on. But across the piece, when you look at the performance for Tesla in Europe, it's not just in small countries. A lot of countries where Tesla has been performing badly, including in Germany, in the UK, where it has been lagging, and Spain as well.
When the trade war between the US and the European Union escalated in early 2025, the consequences for Tesla became even more catastrophic. The trade tariffs imposed by President Donald Trump were not only an economic move, but also a decisive factor that tore Tesla's business model apart. These measures were aimed at protecting American industry and stimulating domestic production. But for a company like Tesla, which relied on global supply chains and international manufacturing, they were a fatal blow. Musk, who had always tried to balance innovation and political influence, found himself at the center of this confrontation. He naively believed that influencing US policy and interfering in economic issues would help his cause. However, it turned out that Trump's policies and their consequences for Tesla were not just a mistake, they were a real disaster for the company. At the time the tariffs on imported components were introduced, Tesla was already expanding its production worldwide, including in Europe and Asia. But the introduction of these duties had unimaginable consequences for their global network. It wasn't just about higher prices for components such as lithium, cobalt, and nickel, all of which were essential to Tesla's electric vehicle production. Even more serious was the effect of increased tariffs on batteries and semiconductor components sourced from Europe, China, and South Korea. The cost of these components for Tesla rose by 30%, which essentially made many of its cars much more expensive to produce and less competitive in the global market. This hit the company's pricing strategy and its ability to compete in the European market, which had previously been one of Tesla's most successful markets.
Well, you will hear people over in Europe say the new Model Y, the Juniper, could be a difference maker, but that's been in that market now for more than a month. And you would think that you'd see a greater snapback if it's going to be a difference maker. Look, we could be wrong. It could be a difference maker once you get the sales for April, May, and June. But when you have a country like Norway, I think the sales were down something like 11% there. I mean, that's a very savvy EV consumer in Norway. And that's long been a strength for Tesla. Very small market, not huge volume, but I think almost all of the vehicles they sell there are electric. And they embraced Tesla long before others. And, you know, the reports there are not encouraging.
Supply problems began to affect every step of the way. The batteries that Tesla ordered from major Asian manufacturers now increased the cost by 40%, making its cars unprofitable compared to cheaper, but technically no less advanced models from European manufacturers. Gradually, all this began to accumulate, and with each passing month, Tesla lost profits. Russian sanctions also played a significant role in this, becoming an additional obstacle to the supply of materials. They paralyzed all possible routes for raw materials, not to mention the fact that Europe itself began to significantly reduce its purchases of American goods. The shortage of critical materials such as lithium and nickel led to a slowdown in Tesla's production. For example, in April 2025, employees at one of Tesla's large factories in Europe said that the company had been forced to suspend production of some car models for several weeks due to a shortage of batteries. This news was a real blow to the company, as consumers, accustomed to fast service and constant improvements to their cars, began to turn to competitors en masse. But this was only one aspect of the crisis.
Hey Diane, this investigation really just beginning, and one of the key elements will of course be the surveillance video, and investigators potentially have a lot of it to work with as they try to figure out what caused this fire. We know that surveillance footage has been turned over, including video from each of the cars, which could prove vital to understanding what happened here, because each vehicle has its own camera system that works even when the car is off, and 16 cars burned in this fire. And right now, investigators don't know what caused it.
Even more devastating was the factor of investors, which played a role in the company's overall decline. When the first data on falling sales in Europe began to arrive in March 2025, investors who had once been among Tesla's biggest supporters began to withdraw their money en masse. The process was rapid. Many large investment funds, which were rightly considered key players in the market, did not just start selling Tesla shares, but literally abandoned the company. Reports that hedge funds, including those from the UK and Sweden, had begun selling Tesla shares en masse came just hours after sales in Europe showed a record 70% drop. Tesla's fall on the stock markets came as no surprise, but the speed with which large investors left was astonishing. A case in point is the reaction of the Saudi Arabian sovereign fund, which had invested tens of billions of dollars in Tesla. In early 2025, they quietly began selling their shares and reducing their stake in the company. Their departure marked the beginning of mass panic. Even major banks such as Morgan Stanley and Royal Bank of Canada began to change their forecasts for Tesla, sharply lowering the company's stock rating. Official statements that they no longer considered Tesla a promising asset for long-term investment triggered a wave of sell-offs. For Musk, this was a blow that only added fuel to the fire, and his public reactions only exacerbated the situation. At the same time, new statements and official forecasts from analysts in the US only reinforced this sense of disaster. One such statement came from analysts at the Roth Capital research firm. who published a report in early April 2025 stating that the consequences of trade wars, low sales, and political instability in Europe could cause Tesla shares to lose another 30% of their value in the coming quarters. These statements were soon confirmed, and the stock price did indeed begin to plummet, marking another milestone in the crisis.
But they are not ruling out the possibility that this was arson. At the same time, as you just mentioned, there are groups that have been organizing ongoing and peaceful protests at Tesla dealerships around the world. These demonstrations targeting Elon Musk and his affiliation with the Trump administration. Also, Italy's prime minister is said to be close friends with Musk, and there were reports that Teslas have been vandalized in her hometown in Italy. Diane.
The blow to Tesla in China was particularly severe. At the end of 2025, in response to the tariffs and economic sanctions imposed, China began to block not only deliveries, but also the registration of new Tesla models. Everything Musk had tried to achieve in the Chinese market has now collapsed, as local manufacturers such as BYD and Geely have begun to capture Tesla's market share thanks to lucrative subsidies and the strengthening of domestic supply chains. The Chinese government, making no secret of its dissatisfaction with US economic aggression, began systematically blocking all attempts by Tesla to strengthen its position in the country. In addition, pressure on production intensified with each passing week, all because Tesla was unable to adapt to changing conditions in local markets.
KTLA Samantha Cortese joins us live with more on the wave of vandalism in protest of Elon Musk and his role in Washington. Sam?
Hi, Sharon, Micah. The ATF and FBI are collaborating with federal, state, and local law enforcement to investigate acts of domestic terrorism surrounding Teslas.
And so, in November 2025, when Musk's last attempt to restore Tesla to its former glory failed, the company officially acknowledged that its golden age was over. Now the company was faced with a choice: either continue to fight, but at a lower level, or admit defeat and start a new path, trying to restore the trust destroyed in many countries. Against this backdrop, questions about Tesla's future and its political and economic role became even more pressing. Would it be able to restore its former reputation, or would its decline prove to be final? Only time would tell, but one thing was clear: Tesla was no longer the brand that proudly represented the future.